Okay. You are live.
All right, welcome to the June Finance Committee meeting of the City of San Ramon. Christina, do you need to do anything at this point? Or
Yes,
in lieu of Martin, is now the time that you do it?
Yeah, I'm going to read out the meeting procedure.
Go ahead.
Prior to roll call, I would like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that the governor has issued 2 executive orders relaxing the requirements pertaining to remote meetings under the Brown Act. To facilitate social distancing and to slow the spread of the coronavirus pandemic, the executive orders authorize state and local legislative bodies, including this committee, to hold public meetings by teleconference more easily. These provisions will remain in effect during the period in which state or local public health officials have imposed or recommended social distancing measures. The order allows the committee to proceed with its members participating electronically or telephonically. Committee members are no longer required to be physically present in a meeting in order to participate or to establish a quorum. The agency must provide a means for the public to observe the meeting and to provide the opportunity to comment. The opportunities for public observation and participation must be and have been included in the meeting notice. The procedures adopted for this meeting have been established to meet or exceed the standards set forth in the order. I will now take roll, for which I would ask the chair to recognize me in order to confirm certain matters for the record.
So recognized.
Vice Chair Perkins.
Here.
And Chair Alone.
Here.
Thank you. I have 3 questions for the committee members. If the answer is yes, please say yes and raise your hand. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Have you been able to hear all previous speakers, including the roll call, clearly?
Yes.
Yes.
And are you satisfied, based on facial or voice recognition or otherwise, that everyone here representing themselves to be a committee member is actually the person they are representing themselves to be?
I think so. Scott looks better looking than normal, so I don't know. The shelter in place is working on him. So yes.
I got a haircut this weekend, and I'm thrilled. Oh.
All right. Look at ship shape there, Scott. Right.
Much better.
The record should reflect that I've received affirmative answers from each member present to all 3 questions. And finally, I would like to advise the committee that any votes taken during this meeting must be taken by roll call.
Okay, at this point, we can turn it over to public comment. I see there are 4 attendees and
All 4 are
like city employees, but does anyone wish to speak?
Okay.
I'll close the public comment. Item 3, approval of minutes.
I move approval.
I will agree. May 11th regular meeting minutes are approved as presented. We have no unfinished business. Item 5, new business 5.1. Introduction of Edie Bailey LLP. That explains the serious faces here on the panelists. So welcome. I don't know who's going to, is it Candace, you're going to present. Go ahead.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. We have with us today the auditors from Eide Bailly. They are new on board with the city. This will be their first audit with the city. So we have Ahmad Garabai, who's a partner at Eide Bailly, and we also have Joe Escobar and Tomo Uku, who are both managers at Eide Bailly. So we're going to let Ahmad start, and he's going to go over the planning letter and the required communication for the council.
Ahmed, I suspect you are muted. Get unmute.
Yes, I am sorry. Can you hear me now? All right, great. Good afternoon, everyone. I am the partner in charge of the audit at the City of San Ramon. This is our first introduction meeting. In this meeting, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the scope of the audit and how it's progressing. We just started, actually. And then some inquiries that we're required to have, and answer any questions if members of the Finance Committee have any. So, the scope of the audit, again, is just to audit the financial statements, ensure that the financial statements are fairly stated. It is a process in which we split it into an interim phase and then a final phase, and then the very last phase is what we call the reporting phase in there. The interim phase is when we look at the internal controls of the city. We look at the manner that you process receipts, the manner that you process disbursements, contracting, purchasing, the manner that you process payroll and your HR policies. We look at budgeting practices. It's mainly internal controls and adherence to city policies related to various aspects within the city, which is and that would be the interim phase of the audit. We come back after the city closes the books. They give us a trial balance, and in this process, it is essentially a confirmation process. We confirm your cash balances, we confirm your debt balances, we look at your capital assets, your property taxes, sales taxes that are reported on the financial statements, and much of those numbers are easily confirmed either with counties or the state or various grantor agencies are out there. We do analytical procedures, we look at your federal and state compliance, we look at contingencies by confirming it with legal counsel. If you are subject to a single audit in which you are receiving $750,000 or more, you're required to go through a federal compliance audit. It's a separate report that will be issued alongside with the financial statements. So if you have that much money coming in the current year, this is something that we will take a look at. Then we will work with the city on the preparation of the financial statements, which is the comprehensive annual financial report. The interim audit actually just started today. We just had a few meetings since the morning with respect to the internal controls with the city. We continue doing that. The interim, the good thing about it is that it does not have a deadline. It can be finished anytime, and therefore if the city finance committee or anybody within the city would like us to put an emphasis on something versus the other as it relates to the financial statements, we can definitely accommodate that. Final is scheduled to begin in October. And that would be right after the city closes its books and make sure that all the numbers have come through and they have good numbers that to present on the financial statements. And then we'll work with the city on the production of the financial statements, making sure that it adheres to the accounting standards that are out there with respect to governments, and issue the CAFR towards the latter part of the year. We will request from management what we call a representation letter, in which they affirm that the financial statements are fairly stated. Some new accounting pronouncements that the city would have to implement. There was one that was actually applicable to the current year, but because of the shutdown, the Government Accounting Standards Board, which is the board that dictates the accounting standards that the city must adhere to, had postponed it by an additional year. So that's good news that GASB 84 is what they call it. It's something that the city will have to implement in the upcoming year. And then next year was supposed to be in the implementation of GASB 87, which relates to leases. That is something that the city now will have to implement in 2022 as opposed to 2021. And with that, I'll be more than happy to take any questions. I do have some comments later on after that, but I just want to see if members of the Finance Committee have any questions with respect to the scope of the audit.
Go ahead, Scott.
Couple of things. Well, first off, thank you very much for becoming our auditor. I know that we had a lot of choices, and there were some very good choices working with our Administrative Services Department. You were the final selection, and we're very glad you're here. With that said, it's always been very important to me that the audit company provider realize that, and I know you already know this, but you work for the council. The council, in fact, has 3 employees, if you will: the city manager, the city attorney, and the city auditor. And so while you will be spending many, many, many hours with the administrative services and our finance department, you know, to make sure that everything is right, you are our eyes and ears mostly eyes and calculators on what the financial reporting status is for us. We, the council, don't have the expertise to do that. So we rely on you to do that. And we appreciate very much your expertise and all. So we thank you very much. Second thing, two areas that I'm always a little concerned about. We've never had a problem that I'm aware of, but I'm always concerned to make sure we don't have a problem. And that is anything that's done in cash or things where the employee credit cards. Those are two areas that can be prone to fraud and have been in some cities and in some organizations. Fortunately, I'm not aware of all the time I've been on council and even before that, that we've had a problem with cash or employee use of credit cards. But it is an area that I do want you to pay particular attention to make sure that those accounts are properly represented. Beyond that, I want to thank you very much. And I'm sure you'll get great cooperation from Candace and her team and Ava and all the staff and going forward. And thank you for being our audit team. That's all I have. Thank you.
So I want to make sure it's Eid Bailey. Is that how it's pronounced?
It's actually Eid Bailey.
Eid Bailey. Okay, Eid Bailey. All right. Any sort of insight into IT security vulnerabilities? I don't know how extensive you get into that with an audit, but I'd be, that's an area of growing concern. And so any insights there would be most welcome. And so other than that, welcome aboard.
Yeah, thank you. Just to do a follow-up, we're actually, today is our first day doing the field work. So we just had two meetings, one with respect to the cash receipts and one with respect to the cash disbursements. And yes, you know, when you're auditing a government, when you're auditing like a private entity, they do have all kinds of assets. You know, they have inventory that may be susceptible, I want to say, just from an audit perspective, to misappropriation. Then the easy thing about local governments is that their biggest asset is really cash. Yes, they do have other assets, but it's not like inventory at like a private company or anything like that. And with that, we do place quite a bit of some emphasis on, you know, segregation. That's what we like to see. And again, the objective is not, I mean, every finance department differs in size. You've got the finance departments in there where there's like a couple of hundred people, and you've got the finance department where there's one person or even two people in there. And the objective is not to disrupt the business in any shape or form, but there are ways to, you know, have some segregation, some form of a segregation. If you're a larger agency, you obviously have more cash in there. You can have a lot more review processes in there. But that is definitely something that we're working with the city on, and they've provided us substantial amount of information, very cooperative, very helpful in you know, answering our questions. And yes, so to answer your question, it is definitely something that we look at, which is cash receipts, cash disbursements, including the P cards, payroll and HR policies, you know, adding employees and removing employees, and, you know, various types of processes that they have within the payroll system. That is definitely something that we look at. IT perspective, we have actually a team that does only the IT audits, and I believe, Joe, they are scheduled to begin the process tomorrow. I can't remember. We have it on our calendar. Yep. And again, it's security and, you know, ensuring that the city has, if something happens, they can always shut it down and, you know, start out fresh. And then having security and, you know, the cybersecurity stuff that is going on out there. Not too many people put an emphasis on it because, you know, they don't get hit by it, but when you get hit by it, it will be rather significant. So it is a dedicated team that does that stuff, and they, I believe, will be beginning to work on that area sometime tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. I can't remember, but definitely those two areas are areas that we put an emphasis on.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. Joe Gordon or Eva, any comments from you folks? It's like we're, I don't know, I'll take that as a no. All right, I guess that's about it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice meeting everyone, and have a good day.
Yes,
You too.
you too.
So item 5.2, proposing the establishment of a new class specification and salary range for electrician 1-2. Staff report by Sarah Onestes. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. So the city has always employed an electrician since I do believe about 2000. Tao Tan was his name, and he ended up retiring. We tried to refill his position, and we found that we didn't get a lot of applications, a lot of qualified applicants. We did hire somebody, but with the low turnout, we suspected that we may not quite be in the mark from a salary perspective, you know, compared to the market. We were able to find somebody. We did hire this individual, but unfortunately they didn't work out. So now we're back to the drawing board. We looked at an opportunity to just revisit and see if kind of what we thought in terms of compensation matched, and we did see we were off by a little bit. So we were hoping that maybe by bumping the salary up a little bit to be at the 75th percentile of market, like we're doing for all of the other classifications, and making it its own standalone classification, that would help attract a more talented pool of applicants. We did add we decided to make it flexibly staffed, a 1/2, because before it was just a journey level position. So someone had to have at least 2 years of experience, but doing the 1, we could have someone maybe newer in their career where they have the appropriate certifications, but maybe a little less than 2 years of experience. We could give them the opportunity to come here and kind of grow with us. So looking at that kind of long-term kind of outlook, because it is a single classification. So we would like to, there's only one of them currently, so we'd like to keep them kind of as long as we can. So with that, we put together a job spec and a proposed salary based again on a market survey, similar to what we do during any sort of like negotiations, like for the July 1. And we have it presented for you. So what we're looking for here is just any comments you may have, and if everything looks well, that it'd be pushed on to go to the larger group for approval and adoption.
Scott, any questions?
I read the report and agree. You know, you know this, you've been in the business a lot longer than I have, but if you don't have the right salary ranges or you don't have the right benefits package, the applicant pool is either really small or really weak, or both. And so you gotta hit it. You gotta be there so you get attractive enough so that the applicant pool is qualified to do the work you need to have done. So I'd recommend that the finance committee forward this to the council for approval.
Fine by me. Thanks.
Right.
We're good.
Thank you so much.
Item 5.3, proposed other post-employment benefits OPEB funding policy discussion. Eva.
Well, I'm bringing this back. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm bringing this back from the special council meeting that we had on May 26th with the full council. We brought several policies, and one of them was the OPEB policy. At that time, I think we mentioned just kind of clarifying some language to the component number 2 of how we would fund the trust.
Right.
And when I went back and looked at it a little bit closer, I felt that it needed to not only be clarified, but to kind of reorganize how I laid it out, and then add some definition of technical terms. So when we're using all these terms, we'll understand what they mean, because I think when we start talking about the different components, it kind of, it didn't really, we start combining 2 meanings when it meant for one individual meaning. So for the normal cost, so I'll go over the three components that will make up how we fund the trust. The normal cost is component number one. It's the contribution each year equal to the amount of what the actuarial study says we should be putting into the trust. However, and that's like 1,070,000 for next fiscal year. However, we actually budget based on our retirees and how we project any other retirees coming on board. So that number that's in the actuarial report is as of that actuary. We're actually doing more current numbers. So our budget is a little bit more. So we have the normal cost covered. It's in our budget. Component number two is the amortization payment for unfunded actuarial liability. This one is a combination of the normal cost and an amortized amount over a 5-year period that's added to the normal cost that will go towards the unfunded liability. So those two components make up what the requirement is that we need to pay every year. We actually put in funding to the trust to cover that cost. So we actually have budgeted a little bit slightly more than the 1.43 million that's required. The other third component is the additional discretionary payment. That would be something that we will bring to the council in a year that we have surplus and there's no other competing expenditures, and it's at the council's discretion as to whether they want to put more money into the trust. So all of these numbers will be counted when we do our next actuary. But we will always be funding the normal cost every year and a portion of the amortization payment. So I just wanted to try to make those clear. And then I added those definitions so we can understand what an actuarial liability is, what the actuarial valuation is. The actuarial determine, we use that word actuarial so much, I thought it would be best to define all of these. So the actuarial determined contribution, we call it the ADC, that's the required amount. And Scott, you did mention that what happens when we're 100% funded. Well, once we're 100% funded, anything that we contribute, any surplus or any, I think we do call it a surplus, we'll count it towards whatever. So if our amount, we owed a certain amount, we can deduct that surplus, or we can just leave that surplus and it would always show over 100% funded. And I think a few years, we always had an asset. So that would be the same thing. And we would just have less to pay in that particular year. So I just thought it would be a easier, cleaner read, but I wanted to bring it to the finance committee since it went to the full council for us to discuss, and then I would take it to the council once we've discussed it with you.
So, assuming under fairly normal circumstances, not this year, but normal circumstances, if you apply the normal cost and the amortization payment for unfunded actuarial liability, in 5 years, you'll be back to 100%.
Yes.
If you can follow the assumptions.
Yes.
And things don't go extraordinarily berserk like they did in March. I thought it was remarkable in March that by the end of middle of June, the markets recovered 80–90% of what it lost in March. I found that remarkable. I have a little bit of Tesla stock. It went down to 390 and it's now back up over 1,000. So the market can do crazy things. Don't put any of our assets in Tesla stock. You won't be able to sleep at night. Okay, so I like the way you've laid things out, and it's fairly easy to follow that you have the normal cost, the amortization payment, and then you have additional discretionary payment. And the additional discretionary payment only comes up when we have surplus and we've prioritized that against whatever else we might want to use that money for.
Correct.
I'm good.
Thanks, Scott. And Eva, so the there's the 1.07 million, there's the 1.43.
Mhm.
Is the 1.43 additive to the 1.07? Or is the 1.07 included in the 1.43?
Included in the 1.43.
Okay, that's what I said. So,
Component 1 and 2 make up the 1.43.
so we're essentially underfunded by 360,000 times 5.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah, they have a certain dollar amount that gets added to the normal cost every year to put aside for the unfunded liability. So it's trying to, just like with the pension, it's trying to add an amount to cover to bring you to 100% funded.
and when you get within the 5% like we are, that's not some insurmountable thing. And to the extent that the market does well or poorly, that's probably a bigger factor than anything else in all this. So,
Right.
good. So what's their total balance in there right now, roughly?
Ooh, and the OPEB trust, I think it's about 30, I know it's in the 30 million.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's 30 or 31 million.
Yeah, and the liability is like 32.
Great. Okay. Well, I agree with you to this sort of stuff is our old CEO, Dr. Pearl, had a rule of 7s. You had to repeat it 7 times, or maybe it was 15 times before doctors understood it. So
Trust me,
this is
repeating
this-
the actuary to go over the actuary. So let me understand this because it is very complicated.
absolutely, absolutely.
You're not doing it on a regular basis. It gets really confusing.
Good. And so with that, I'm ready to move it forward to the, I guess, to just, so the council's going to get this to better understand it.
We'll have it on the council agenda for tomorrow, but I wanted to run it by the finance committee first before taking it to the council.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, thank you.
Scott, do you have any other comments?
No, not at this time. Be very interested to see what your preliminary closing is. I know that you don't get a good number for, I mean, a good solid number for many, many months, but it'd be interesting to see what your early closing number is, because you're usually within a few tens of thousands, as I recall, aren't you?
Yes, and I think we usually give you a preliminary number like in September.
Always interested to see how that goes.
Yes.
Okay. No, I don't have anything for anything
Okay.
else.
Well, again, Joe Hoffman, thank you for the almonds. And I guess we'll see most of you tomorrow evening. Thanks very much. We're adjourned.
You're welcome. Thanks, Phil.